feel like you're in Jane Austen everywhere you go. What do you do for a living? Like don't even start me on the congestion zone. You can see the pollution in the air and they charge you £5 for leaving the house. Hi guys and welcome back to my channel. If you're new around here, I am Yvette and I moved to the UK 2.5 years ago and I'm documenting my experiences, and I thought I've spent majority of my residential time in the UK in London, which I know can be a sore spot in terms of like there's more to the UK, which I absolutely agree with. However, a lot of the requests I get are from people who want to move to the UK and specifically London. So I wanted to make a video summarising the best and the worst and the pros and the cons of living in London, because, you know, living in London, you know, it's very yin and yang, two sides of the coin, lots of ups, lots of downs. So, like everything, I just try and provide the most information I can so you can make an informed decision. So that's what this video is. So without waffling further, I'll jump into it and give you all of the pros and cons of London living. Number one is that there is so much to do. Always something on, even in our current environment of like coming out of a pandemic, like there's still so much on. My parents are coming in December to visit, and I'm filling up my calendar for them, and I was like thinking, oh no, you know, one, it's winter, two, pandemic, like I hope there's enough to like keep them interested for 4 weeks. And I'm like, I'm gonna be too tired. Like I'm tired thinking about December at this point. There's just so much on, from comedy clubs to jazz clubs to music to clubs to pubs to theatre, December pantos, like even the nightlight trails, like there's just everything on, and that's in the winter. And then in summer, obviously you have all of like the little festivals, even when I say festival I mean like Glastonbury, but I also mean like cheese and wine festival. There's everything your heart desires, and because of that there's so many people that you can connect with, which is helpful because there's so many people, so there's always your type of person around. The con of that is that you can get paralyzed for choice, in that, I don't know about you, but I'm very indecisive. So if you give me too many options, I'm like, what do I have to choose now. And sometimes that can get stressful, trying to, I don't know, I end up sometimes just not picking anything. The epitome of this is if I'm online shopping, I'll put everything in the cart, then look at all of the options, look at the price and be like, I can't commit to this, and then close out and buy nothing. I do that all the time because I am bad with choice. So that often happens with London, is there's just so much on the weekend and I can't decide, so I'm just like, none of it. Another thing I particularly love about London, this is somewhat of the whole UK as well, but coming from a country that's not very old, like Australia or America, like in the scheme of things, not that old, particularly Australia. In terms of like federation, I'm aware of indigenous things, but you know what I mean, like structurally things aren't very old there. We don't have much history because there's nothing European documented around, like, you know, in Europe and in London as well, as there's such deep and rich history around like the monarchy, politics, civilization, even like the Saxons, like how we evolved as a species. If you go back far enough, and then, you know, different wars and things like that. And I just don't get that in Australia. I know America has obviously got like Revolutionary War and that, and the Civil War, but, you know, very rarely are they feuding with, you know, France or something, although they are technically. I'm not going to bring America into this. Australia has literally like, they had an emu war and they lost against some emus. Like that's the history I'm used to. And so because of the rich history here, there's like so many beautiful buildings, even like you can go and see sites of where places were bombed during the Blitz, and you can see like there's places in London where the fence is made up of like, oh gosh, I don't know what it's called, but you know, the little casualty beds they carried in the war, like the stretchers, the casualty stretchers, they like repurpose them into fences around London. Like everything in London is like historic in some way, and that's amazing. And I really love, feels like you're actually like living history, whereas outside of it, I find I'm like just observing history. The con is that generally there are lots of tourists because of that, which I used to not worry about. Like I was like, oh, well, you know, is what it is. But then I moved here and now when I'm trying to get to my appointments all over London and there's just like a family of people with like cameras out stopping in the middle of the pathway, as you know, rule number one in London is never stop. So And then if you're trying to book things, they can often book up. So like if you want to go to Buckingham Palace, tourists will get in before you because they're more on their game. When you live here, you kind of become a bit casual with it all. I think that might be a rather selfish attitude. I'm like, I want and don't want to share. But I'm aware, but it's something to be aware of. I would never say this is worth not moving to London for. Although it depends where you live, because if you lived on Oxford Street, I don't know if I could be held accountable dealing with that crowd every day. My number one thing I loved about London before I moved here, and still here, is how green it is. I've read that it is the greenest city in the world. It has 40% or 45% green space. So many parks, so much opportunity to enjoy it. Europe and Londoners in general do parks well. You can have picnics, it's good for like, and because of that it's very dog centric, which obviously my heart. And then, yeah, I just love the parks. It feels, and I think this comes to because of the weather and that, because it's more green, it just feels very storybook, very Wind in the Willows. It's like everything idyllic, feels very idyllic is the word. And I think that's, you know, I could go out to the countryside of England or Wales or Scotland or Northern Ireland, and I could be in a green space and think, this is idyllic. I 100% agree, and I do love that. But it's something special to get that same feeling in the middle of one of the biggest cities in the world. That's a huge feat, and it's like amazing that they've achieved that. The con of those parks is, and I say this as someone, so back before we moved, I was in Highgate, spoilers. I used to walk around Waterloo Park all the time with the dog, every morning and afternoon. I could render that. I could give you if I could draw, I could do a like perfect sketch of that. I know every tree, I know every leaf, I know every piece of grass of that park. And it was beautiful, and it was great during the lockdowns because you could go out and like get your hour of exercise a day. But once there was that time where all you could do was have a picnic, and the parks in London went mental. It was like being in Glastonbury, but in a park. So that was a bit crazy. And so there was a lot of like rubbish. And I know, I was actually talking to Daniel, like Bambi, the dog, if you're new around here, I have a dog. Yeah, she used to throw up randomly a lot more frequently when we were in London. And I think that's because she's eating random things that I can't catch. I'm normally pretty good, but you know, I'm never perfect because people would leave crap in the grass when she's going to the toilet. So I'd let her off the lead to go to the toilet, and then she's gulped down someone's something and made herself sick because people don't pick up after themselves. Generally it's pretty good, but you know, there's only so much they can do really. And then the other thing is sometimes, not always, sometimes parks have gates on them and they close. Have been locked in a park before. Don't recommend. It's very stressful trying to get out. But the ones that aren't are a bit dodgy. Like I wouldn't go through Hampstead Heath in the evening. You very well could get mugged or worse. So they can be quite dangerous spots, but I suppose anywhere can, really. Okay, I'm gonna do my best to not devolve into an absolute waffly rant in this one. The pro is that you get paid more to work, you get paid more if you work in London. The con is the cost of living. So yeah, there is a thing called like the London inflation. You get paid extra per whatever to cover London, which is good. I appreciate it, but the cost of living in London is astronomical. One of the reasons we moved is that we could not afford, I wanted more space. Where we lived in Highgate was obviously, Highgate's a beautiful suburb. To afford to live there, we were in a very, very tiny flat, as you will have seen from my tour. So we wanted more space. My main priority was I wanted a garden for the dog so that I didn't have to walk around Waterloo Park every morning and evening, rain, hail or shine. And that was it, more space and mostly a garden. And you just cannot buy anything in London that is freehold and has a garden. If you want to know what freehold is, let me know. I don't know if this is normal vernacular. It's now my normal vernacular after the journey we have been on. It's just to buy a flat, a one-bedroom studio or a studio or a one-bedroom flat in London can be £500,000. Like that's $1 million Australian dollars. For like, essentially in the UK, you don't even own that. You can't own the land, so then the landlord still makes rules, like you can't have dogs and you can't, you know, rip out this wall. So you're still quite restricted. So you're spending, in my opinion, spending $1 million Australian dollars and then don't get any freedom, and I'm all about freedom. So yeah, it's just astronomical. And then on top of that, so if I was, say I had that much money to burn. Let's pretend, let's indulge. I buy a £500,000 one-bedroom flat. I don't have a garden. I wouldn't have a car space for that. Then I have to pay for a parking permit on the street, which sometimes they'll close streets and they don't tell you, and if you didn't check the sign within 24 hours, they're gonna fine you. Like, I got so many street parking fines for parking on my own street. So annoying, because there was obviously like restrictions that in lockdown we weren't leaving the house, so I didn't see. Very irritating. I haven't let it go. Told you this would turn into a rant, I'm sorry. And then obviously the tube is not the most, it's still not the most, like, it can add up is my point. But it's okay, it's fine. And there's buses, so there are options with transport. But yeah, it's mostly food, groceries, rent, utilities, all of like the basics are a lot higher in my opinion than the, particularly like if you want to buy as well, higher than the markup on working in London. So it's a little bit, but you still compromise to get the full experience. Don't even start me on the congestion zone. So this next one, I'm hoping this video lasts longer and is more relevant to people longer than this current time period. So yeah, and it's starting to become more relevant that the tube is great. It truly is. It's not that expensive and it really can get you basically everywhere, except I find East London very hard to get around to. I don't know if I'm just broken, but yeah. Overall, tube is fantastic. Particularly, once again, I come from a country that doesn't really have good public transport in any way, shape or form. The equivalent of the tube for me in Sydney came every 20 minutes. So it's kind of like, imagine you had your railway, like Western Railway, Northwest Railway, the railways. Imagine that was your city as well. Like it just went in and dropped you at Central. And that was it, because that's what Sydney's like. So to have the option to get around, and I go into London for work frequently and I never have to drive, and I love that because I don't mind driving in London, but I hate trying to find parking. That's so much wasted time, so I just rather jump on the tube and go, and it's fantastic. The downside of this is everyone agrees with me and the tube can get very packed. I also will say the tube can be polluted. So obviously now we wear masks on the tube, and to be honest, it's a COVID thing, but I'm gonna keep it because I think if you've ever been on the Central line and you're waiting for your tube, you can see the pollution in the air and you're like, this is disgusting. So I'm like pro mask for the pollution down there at this point. Also, I don't want to breathe in other people's germs, but mostly the pollution. So yeah, it can be very crowded. You can be proper sardined, which is like, as a woman, you have to be a bit more on edge and like strategically place your bag in locations so people don't touch you, things like that, which is a massive con. And sometimes was I trying to change at Victoria? No, Warren Street on the Victoria line, and the crowd to get on couldn't get on at the point of like the trains were just going and like no one was getting on because it was so busy. I think that happened recently as well because of Comic-Con, crazy. So when it's busy, it's hard. It's a hard time, but in theory works well. I think the problem is the population's grown significantly since it was built. Next one, the number one reason I came to the UK, I moved here, travel. Travel is fantastic. In London, there are like 4 airports in and around. So you've got, no, maybe even 5. There's London City, Heathrow, Gatwick, Stansted and Luton. 5 airports. That's wild. And you can get incredibly cheap flights all around, whether it's inside the UK or Europe, or anywhere, but mostly they're cheap to Europe. And so you can go traveling quite fast and easy because it's quite easy to get to an airport. Like it's only, you leave like an hour basically, you can get to something. And then, yeah, so it's just fantastic for getting around. And then as well, as I've alluded to, the train system, I wish it was cheaper, but like amazing, is that you can get to Manchester in like 2 hours and I can get to Scotland in like 4 hours or 5 hours. Like, and then sitting on I love train travel the most. Planes are like, okay, but you gotta go through security, it's a lot of stress. But just to pop on a train and sit down and like travel high speed somewhere and you get to like read a book or work on your laptop, it's like so relaxing and so productive. It's like great efficiency. Love it. We just don't have that in Australia. I don't think America has much trains as well. So I definitely love that. The downside to that is, like I said, cost of trains is very expensive, and then the downside is Brexit has added some regulations on travel, and then also I think it's important to realize carbon footprint as well. As I know back in the day there's a lot of people doing like, you know, single days to Paris and single day to Budapest, like flight in at 7 and flight out at 10. That is probably not good for the environment if you're doing that frequently. So choosing the greener option, trying to be a bit more sensitive to that, try and do a train when possible. But that's up to you to decide, I guess, and that's a line for each person to draw. My favourite thing about London, particularly West London, is the architecture. The homes are stunning. I'm always, do you know that like TikTok that's like, let me see in your house? I'm that person creeping around, looking, trying to check out everyone's window and checking out everyone's decor, like, and then I see someone walk out of this big mansion in like Hampstead and I'm like, what do you do for a living? Like how do you, and then do I, do you know? They're just so beautiful and stunning, and they're all like the Downton Abbey type, Bridgerton, beautiful houses of our dreams. And then you can go to Notting Hill and they've got all the coloured ones. So there's, yeah, it's beautiful, very picturesque. You feel like you're in Jane Austen everywhere you go. The downside is it's expensive and you'll probably end up in like, so there's a common thing where they've built like, what are they called? Brutalist style architecture. Look at me and my words. Which is like those big square brown tall buildings with like a block of flats inside. I think back in the day, very common after the war, that they were seen as like social housing, and then eventually they've been sold off privately and now they're privately owned. So those, in my opinion, look, everyone has their own style. I love an Edwardian house. I love a Victorian house. I don't love a brutalist style, I will be honest. Yeah, I can basically only afford a brutalist style flat. And as I've stated earlier, there's all those regulations on that. So you basically look at these stunning houses and like, there's no way in the world anyone who doesn't have a trust fund can buy them. Truly upsetting, but we move, we do what we can. They're stunning though. If money was no option, I would buy a Hampstead detached house in a heartbeat. But money is an option, and that's annoying. So my next point is that London is very dog and pet friendly. Like I said, there's lots of green parks. Everyone has a dog. I think it's very common for people to live in London with pets, and whether you have a flat or not, you can walk them, and like, because there's so much parks and dog walkers, and I just in general, you can take them to restaurants and cafes and pubs, and even a lot of offices these days are letting you take your dog in. Well, I'm very dog friendly. I'm sure they're cat friendly too, but I've got a dog, so that's how my brain goes. However, the con of this is renting can be tricky, and it can cost you extra, as always, like everything in London. They charge you £5 for leaving the house. So when I rented with Bambi, we had to pay like we had to pay basically double the bond, even though I maintain my dog is better behaved than most children. She has never had an accident in that house. Most she did was vomit, but I can't blame her for that. Excellent dog. Never choose anything. It was also unfurnished, so I was like, what do you think she's gonna do? But I know I have seen some videos of like huskies like attacking doors. If you've seen my dog, she's not attacking anyone. So yes, I had to pay like £2,000 bond instead of £1,000 bond. We got it back in the end, which is good, but it's like, unless you have that capital, it's basically like money talks, like everything, which is super annoying, but it's just an extra hurdle you have to do if you want to have a pet. But it is definitely worth it. I loved that flying Bambi over from Australia was like the best thing we ever did. I'm so happy I had her, particularly in lockdown. Oh my God. If I was like, power to anyone out there that's like single and no pet, I don't know how you did lockdown. The next thing is that there are so many fantastic restaurants. This also comes up with the spoilt for choice issue, is that there's so many beautiful restaurants, everything, like you could get so many, any dietary requirement, vegan restaurant, upscale vegan, like vegan markets, anything. You've got like Mayfair, really posh Indian, or you can go to Brick Lane and get like authentic Indian from like a dad who's been doing it for like 50 years. It's like the food scene is like so diverse. You can get like Ethiopian food, you can get Korean, Japanese, probably Bolivian food. You could get anything you wanted, which is why I always find the complaint that British food is crap is really stupid, because I'm like, well, yes, say what you want about like authentic British food, but like realistically, you can eat whatever you want if you live here. So like, stop complaining. Neither here nor there. The downside to this is my waistline cannot take all of the good pizza. So eating out all the time, one, bad for my bank because it's not the cheapest. Also, they're getting really sneaky and putting this service charge on, which like, I understand tipping in America because like they don't have the same level of like minimum wage, although minimum wage should be higher here, I agree, but it's not the same situation as America. And also if I want to tip, I want to give it to the waiter. I don't want it to just go into like the restaurant owner's hands, do you know what I mean? I want to make sure they get it, but gotta watch for that. Gotta watch for that service charge, like 12%. 12% on like £60 is like, okay. Anyways, and then once again, it depends on the service, which is hard because I think Londoners in general don't want an overly attentive waiter. So if you have someone that comes in like with that American style customer service being like, is everything okay? Is everything okay? You'd be like, can you calm down? But like, I understand why they're doing it. But yeah, it's just, I don't know if it necessarily translates across the pond. Another thing I love about London is that you have green space. You've got metropolitan city and you're like an hour-ish from the seaside. Admittedly, the seaside is not what I'm used to, but it's still an option and I like that. You know, it's easy to poo-poo the beach and the seaside in the UK until it's 40 degrees and you're like, I'm gonna kill someone unless I get into a body of water right now. So you can catch, from London, you can go straight down to Brighton in like 60 minutes. Crazy. And then there's also like Southend if you want to go to Essex, like, or if you want to go further, Cornwall, you know, that's obviously more than 90 minutes, but you know what I mean, like there's just so many options to like get to the seaside so you don't feel as like isolated and trapped in a big city as you can. The downside is once it does hit, you know, 30 degrees, everyone has the same idea as you and going to the beach is an Olympic sport. It's a group activity with you and the entirety of the UK. My last point, I think might be slightly ego stroking, but it's very diverse. You get expats from all over the world. So it's really fun because I have friends who are obviously British. I've got friends who are from London. I've got friends who are from the north of England. I've got friends from Scotland. I've got friends from Ireland. I've got friends from Austria, America, France, so many different perspectives and life experiences that I can learn from. Whereas Australia is very isolated. It's like very rare to meet someone not from Australia because it's quite far, and it's, I guess, such a commitment to move there that like you don't get people like passing through or living there for a few years. Like if you go, you're going forever. So there's much less people, so you're less likely to be exposed to that. I think I only knew one person who wasn't from Australia when I lived there, and that was a South African. So, you see what I mean? So it's not as diverse, but I don't know what America's like. I think America's probably, actually no, America's definitely diverse. It's definitely like, not their issue, it's definitely an Australian issue. But I love it, I see it as a benefit. The con to the diversity that is London is that because of Brexit, it's added a lot more tension, uncertainty, stress. Visas cost, oh my god, I've got to redo my visa next year. Stress. So yeah, I think I should get a discount for being in the Commonwealth. I get no benefit, and I'm pretty sure my money's been going to the Queen. Maybe, I don't know. But yes, I can make a whole video ranting about the visa process if needed. But yes, hopefully this video has enlightened you to some of the pros and cons of living in London. Let me know in the comments below what your pros and cons of London are. Did I miss some? Is there something glaringly obvious that I haven't done? But yes, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up so I know to do more of this. It really helps me. If you want to support me in a non-monetary way, not that I've given you a monetary way, is just to comment below and give me a thumbs up. And if you really like me, subscribe. That would be very helpful. But yes, thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time. Don't know when this is going up.